Hello. Hello. I am live, I guess. It is a hot, humid day here in Brooklyn. The sun is just going down behind the buildings. I have a cup of tea. And my cat is asleep on the bed, but will probably decide to make a nuisance of herself at some point. So for those of you tuning in who I don't know, hi, I'm Rose Manspeaker. I'm a writer from West Virginia, currently living in Brooklyn, and I'm just excited to share some poetry and hang out with y'all this evening. Give me just a moment. So, the poems that I picked out to read today, I think I realized as I was looking back at them, they both, place is a huge part of my writing, and it draws from environment a lot. And I think that for most of the pieces that I picked, both Brooklyn and Buchanan live in them at least a little bit. So I'm going to read some that are in my first chapbook that's out from Bottle Cap Press, titled Small Black Box. I'm going to read a small portion of a micro chap that's coming out this summer, and I'm going to read some drafts. I think I picked mostly stuff that I either really wanted to revisit for whatever reason. I hadn't looked at it in a while and wanted to come back to it, give it some air again, or stuff that I have been working on, stuff that has been at the forefront of my mind. And some of them I don't think that I've ever read aloud before. I know that some poets like to read as revision to really hone the sound in poems. I've never been like that. I edit really visually, but then I go to readings and of course I read out loud and I'm like, oh, let me just make an edit really quickly. And so the first poem that I've been working on that I'm going to read, I don't think I thought about this when I picked it, but it moves really explicitly between Brooklyn and Buchanan. The title is On Distance, and I'll get to it in a moment, but it's thinking a lot, and I think a lot of my work lately has been thinking about distances and the way that language creates and can close distance. Yeah, I am going to just hop into the first poem. After I read, I'll give everyone a chance if you want to ask questions in the chat about any of the poems that I read, about process, about most anything. So, On Distance. I've kept the yard barren a whole year now. Hoped with silence something would regrow or bloom anew. Decided not to check for progress, though I glance that way daily. Home, a place they sieved a body from the river bend, where engines whistle through the distance. Could be anywhere. When it was common ground, we trample it, wash imported grass seeds off with rain. Whoever purchased uniformity here has more, pennies positioned on the tracks. We kicked up flowers, picked bouquets of clover, and Bluebell named them daisies, forgot to collect the spoils. The sudden recall, a body crushes into yours. The 2 pennies. Displaced we skitter through the tunnel dark. Our knees touch as I grasp the metal rod. From their seat, this stranger offers pizza to a stranger, flips the cardboard lid, compliments cracking paint on the other's nails. A cop looks askance. The frame forcefully readjusts. Here, our stop's fluorescence cleaves through fiberglass. Light has not come from within. I think that a lot of the themes, this is a piece that I've sort of been using as one of the openers to a manuscript in progress because it touches on a lot of the themes and unifies a lot of the themes that show up in my other pieces, and definitely the ones that show up in the pieces that I'll read today. And I think also, so if you requested the text of the poems, you'll be able to see this. But if you didn't, it's worth noting that pretty much all of my work moves across the page in some way. It moves through the space on the page. It has a performance on the page that I think I'm still figuring out a bit how to perform vocally. But so the one I just read uses a lot of white space, moves back and forth. You might hear some of it in the pauses. But I think it's worth bringing up now because the poem that I'm going to read next, formally, so if you can see it, or you can also see it online at Poetry Northwest, but I think it's worth noting before I read it that the shape of the piece is a block of paragraph, but it's centered around a block of white space, and wraps around it. On seeing a frosted frog melting into a cake, I begin to think about what Schrodinger's cat wants. I text my friend the photos of this ice creature curling in on itself, a wick burnt beyond its usefulness, and the phrase, he just wants to live, after some consideration, or possibly die. Is it A, impossible, B, banal, and or C, unethical to conduct a thought experiment regarding the thoughts of someone other than yourself? What Schrödinger positions as important in demonstrating his principle is our lack of ability to observe the subject, the opaque box which prevents these quantum states from collapse. There is some utility in thinking about that which we have never observed, he posits. I would hate to waste someone's final moments with usefulness. Our best record of possibility comes in the form of final communiques from now decedents, jumbled words or furrowed brows over unfocused eyes or small twitches of a finger. The last time we saw them, the last thing we said. It is ridiculous to find comfort in yet untrod ground. Still ridiculous, our own search for truth. I want to ask for every detail of what happened, but I don't. Any definite affirmation of state collapses us all into a singular reality, a world of the dead and dying. But the seconds tick. The universe opens back up, spring-loaded by the incomprehensible other. In each subsequent photo, the delicate frosting lifts further to the left. This I can observe. Is it out of the realm of possibility that the subject wants something other than the options I can communicate? Words which only describe the states imagined by someone unknown to the subject very much unknown to them. In isolation, with these states superimposed onto our bodies, we may dream outside the confines of language. The very principle in question considers every status a possible innovation, though it is a superposition of so many realities. Perhaps to want something, to gain something, is simply not the point. Perhaps it is the only point, and the act of knowing the thought is a direct infringement on the desire. I've lost track of who I've positioned as my subject. My friend responds, I love you. And I think I have to say, because I don't think I've ever said in regards to this poem, shout out to my friend Christine for always taking my weird texts. I think I remember writing this one, I think just after I'd gotten a dose of the vaccine and was a little feverish, texting her late at night. Friends are a great resource. The next thing that I'm going to read a series of 3 poems, and I think I'm just going to preface all of them now. So I was lucky enough to be given a Brooklyn Poets Fellowship this past fall to study in one of their community workshops, and I took a workshop titled Self, City, Nature, or some combination of those 3 words, with the poet Emily Wallace Hughes. And this had already been sort of part of my practice, but we spent a lot of time in our sessions writing in Prospect Park in particular, in Brooklyn. And I really ended up developing a large series of poems that are written about parks, were written within parks, that sort of want to explore the politics of parks, which I think has a little in it, the politics of borders, the politics of gentrification, the politics of interaction with the natural world. And so 2 of these pieces were written in the same place. And one of them is a bit of a departure, but they're exploring the first one was written in Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and I'll let that one stand for itself in a second. And then I began to explore from that. I have a poem written in Prospect Park really exploring, what is it to spend time researching details of poems? And I think the last poem I read has some of that in it too. What does it mean to try to be certain of something? What does it mean to try to be exact when we cannot, when language is in itself inexact? And the final poem in the series that I'm going to read is set in one of my favorite places in West Virginia. So, Figure Study, Brooklyn Botanic Garden. How cruel the flower that hungers in absence of care. Cherry blossoms never bloom the moment I view them. The garden, all the people, snippets and sounds just short of blossom. I was never blessed with the gift of timing. How lucky then for records of otherwise, the hope in sketching lines. Though when beauty is offered, I slide close the window. Photographers wander the near barren ground, casting lenses at branches and sky. A volunteer cuts careful growth from the rose bush. A man with headphones, vibrations into fresh air, talks and talks of wedding gifts and investments in crypto, framed by the arch of 2 pink-budded trees. Online, an image in bloom, material, unfelt. When it all seems so available, how do I figure cost and labor? I find it impossible to write of people with tenderness. Reduced to a moment, there is only cruelty. As when I speak the only words I ever wish to say, sustenance is offered, stranger to stranger. What I mean, tender roots twine beneath this sketch of need and expectation. How cruel my hunger. I researched this poem, I promise, but I can't say that'll be of any use. Every plant either has evolved from a tree or will become one, and an oak is closer siblings to a dandelion than a maple. Don't quote me on the specifics. Crustacean doesn't mean anything either, swear to God, that's just a thing we called a thing to understand it. Everything clawed could someday carcinize into a crab. Broad categories are fashioned, for whose convenience? I sat on the blades of grass, thinking about it, until they itched my skin and there was no comfort in sitting, and my shoulders were full once again of freckles or moles or uncertain futures. This worries the difference between truth and what we can learn about it. By truth, I mean something that exists, but maybe not here. And by we, I mean everything. Sometimes you can reduce all of it to a single object, the world, the people, the truth. It makes sense that way. I don't know how nuance and ethics overlap, but to quote Molly Brodak, the good question is always how. The trees still exist outside, and I've written that in a million different ways, or plucked the deer from their roots, easing their antlers from the bark. I should probably learn something about trees, except trees aren't real, just a plant with structures thick enough to hollow into a home. Passivity unbecoming of the poet, calling a creature another name, any name, to make sense of it. If I moved into the pond, how would I call myself? You can't love anyone without knowing them. But that was lazy of me. Forget that ending. I don't know what any of this means without you, and someday it will mean nothing at all. Wait, and let me try again. And I think I will pause for a moment and say some of the things that I mentioned in that poem are actually really fascinating. If you wanted to learn more, like when I say I should probably learn something about trees, except trees aren't real. It's sort of, tree isn't really a useful category except for categorizing how it looks to us visually. But I say a little in the poem, but like plants genealogically, they sort of evolve into or historically have evolved into and out of structures that we might call trees, have become woodier and thinner again. So, Audra State Park. Through a series of turns, limbs shorn by lightning, waters, drowning roots free and loose, the signs have rusted off or spun clear about. But it's a way I know, even after the mud grips the wheel and permanently jacks my alignment. We park, grab the bottles, the smoked turkey, the buns. We skirt the water, the up and down cliffs for hours, for miles, past all the spots, clear, river, and rocks, to the one that I know. I can walk on water here, when the river is right and the rapids grate moss off the rocks. My feet skim the surface. I move with conviction. Even the places not made for me must hold me, given time to adjust. I wave my arms to the other shore. Look, no land, and one more step. I would gladly lie to God. What is interesting about relaying a truth? I'm saying you should hold me as I sun-dry, laughing. I'm saying I would give up knowing. A truth I have allowed myself, an arrogance, grounded in ownership, footprint in pliant moss. What was not made to hold me must, in ownership and arrogance. I'm saying I would hold you. The tires spin, slip deep into the mire. Convicted, the river continues its rush. That poem, the last one that I read, if it sounded like it was in two sections, it's because it very much is, and I actually wrote them maybe even a year apart. Part of the way that I revise sometimes, or even like write more into an idea, is I write a full poem and feel like I've worked on it, I've revised it, I've worked it. And it is a whole poem by itself, but not perhaps what I intended to write. It's not the idea that I was writing into at first. So I start over, keep that draft. Here comes the cat stretching. Keep that draft and write into that idea again, starting from the same title, like with this poem. Write into it and see what else arises. The last piece that I'm going to read is the first section of a microchap, a small chapbook that will be published online, available for free this summer with Ghost City Press's summer series. Here's Kitty. And I know I've never read this one out loud, so I wanted to spend some time with it like this. It's only the first couple sections of what is a 10-page poem. So, context collapse. Why did I think I could want? The answer to a question is not a straight line from the question. Abstraction, to drag away, the space made empty, a hole without its dirt. Is the rose a flower or petaled sum of casualties to its survival? Echo and sound. At some distance I begin to invent definitions for the familiar. For instance, horror. Every mole on my back. Everything I have carefully placed outside the window in the little yard I rent, and then beyond, the light. Light I have rented as a metaphor for what and why. Why then? Terror. Every forward step. Every month too quickly comes due. I'm asking you for something, or I will. I am an abstraction of another I, yet still made. How much labor in this letter? Money become an abstraction of data, becomes an extraction of money. Is reality only what you can fit in your mouth, so different from what comes out? I have ascended to the rostrum to receive my award. I have evolved my upper jawbone to receive my rostrum, my teeth, my beak that I might rise. Life has descended into semiotics. A voice calls from another room, another room, another room. To live there is pointless. I have descended into my jawbone, tonguing, my hollow into speech. I had to read that fighting my cat trying to bite my headphones, but... So, that is the last piece that I'm going to read today. If anyone has any questions, I think I saw one already in the chat, but I'll give you some time to write any more questions. But I wanted to say too, as I was preparing for this today, I was also listening to the Tin House Between the Covers podcast. In particular, they have a series called Crafting with Ursula, which is engaging with the works of Ursula Le Guin. And one of the points that they touched on, I haven't even finished the episode yet, was the sort of companionship of science fiction and organizing, which is that they both start from, here's an observation of the world, and then the question, given that, what else could the world be? And in particular, the thought that asking that question, asking what can I imagine, is freedom. And I think that poetry to me is freedom. Like, given a page or a web page or a wall or a stage or a video, I can make anything. And I think with poetry, I'm not always interested in what I can imagine about the world, but I'm interested in saying, here's an observation, or here's a way I see the world, or here I have started to break apart this idea about the world. What can other people imagine and build with those parts? And I see Paula in the chat asks, if someone was introduced to your work for the first time and you could choose which poem they start with, which one would you choose for them and why? That's a great question. And I think that my answer to that will probably change like the minute I say something. But given what I've put out in the world this far, I think it's actually one of the ones that I read. I think it is the On Seeing, the Schrodinger's cat poem. I think that it's a distillation of a moment in my life in a way that I haven't quite put together in other ways. It speaks to what I'm interested in poetry, what I'm interested in language, but it also speaks, and I think in that speaks more to who I am and what I think about the world than, I don't know. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Yeah, that was, I don't think I said what episode it was. Yeah, that was Adrienne Marie Brown's. Uh, that was her on the Between the Covers podcast. And I think she also does a podcast about Octavia Butler's novels. But yeah, Adrienne Marie Brown is where that idea comes from, that sci-fi and organizing as, or where I am pulling that idea from, as sort of similar ways of moving about the world. So, and I also see, yeah, I see SJ in the chat had said, I love this poem as a kind of sketch of a place and wandering thoughts, which I didn't see that when it popped up, so I'm going to guess that was the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. But that is sort of the style of the poems that I chose, isn't it? Wandering thoughts and then collapsing them into here is this moment, or pushing them out into the world again. Yeah, I was listening also to an episode that was with Ada Limon the other day that was fantastic, especially about how her poetry engages with naming, and which is something that I'm really interested in as well. Naming as a way, sort of staking a claim on something, but also as a way of really asking for its companionship and engaging with it. Yeah, so thank you all for joining me this evening. I turned my fan down and I am hot. So I will say before I go, if you want to keep up with my work, I have a new poem that I didn't read today coming out on June 1st it'll be online with Passenger's Journal. And then I saw the Go City Press Summer Series was linked in the chat as well. They do a fantastic summer series. They're all micro chaps, all 10 pages, so they're quick reads, and they're all free. So that'll be happening this summer, and that piece that I read the beginning of will be coming out the rest of it will be coming out sometime during the summer. So, thank you all for joining me. Have a great rest of your day.